Supported by more than 700 independent reviews from educators and STEM leaders, the Discovery Cube is proud to launch Discovery Cube Connect. Our Connect platform takes the guesswork out of where and how to find fun, interactive, and educational STEM content online for your children and students. Hands-on, engaging, grade-specific, and easy to use, we are bringing Discovery Cube's award-winning programming right to your home. And as we adapt to the current events, Discovery Cube will be adding new STEM content with videos, documentaries, original programming, experiments, and entertainment all coming soon. Our mission has always been to inspire, educate, and impact. And we are proud to be an energetic partner helping your family with Discovery Cube Connect.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight to our second CUBE Talks. I'm Bree Grissett-Smith, Chief Development Officer of Discovery Science Foundation. Discovery Science Series presented virtually by CUBE Innovators every second Tuesday of the month for the next 12 months, so mark your calendars. Tonight, Dr. Claire Leone will be speaking for 20 minutes on creating a stronger STEM pipeline, how to attract and retain women engineering, a research summary. I'd like to take a few minutes to thank the Innovators Leadership Council for their time and treasures in supporting the Discovery Cube, and in particular, these upcoming speaker series. They allow us the opportunity to come together and embrace science as we navigate these difficult times through our own science education. Thank you so much to Janet Ray and Jay Witzling for leading this incredible group. And thank you to all who submitted your questions ahead of time. If you have a question, please provide it in the chat room or in the Q&A section, and we will do our best in answering all the questions in the allotted time. For those of you who are unable to join us or would like to view this broadcast at a later date, we will be recording it and making it available on YouTube. And now I'd like to introduce our very own Jay Witzling, Innovators Vice Chair, who will introduce our speaker tonight.
Thank you, Bree, and thanks to all of you that have joined us on the webinar this evening. It's really a pleasure for me to introduce Dr. Claire Leone, who has had over 40 years of experience working in aerospace industry, government, and academia. Actually, Claire and I kind of share a little bit of our background together. She did have an undergraduate degree in mechanical engineering, as I did. But when she started at Hughes, she started to work on satellites. And when I started working at McDonnell Douglas, I started working on launch vehicles, and Claire's satellites were a little big for our Delta rocket, so she went on to bigger and better things and launching them on the shuttle and other places. She started her career at Hughes Space, which eventually became Boeing in 1979. She gained experience across the company through positions of increasing responsibility in systems engineering and program management. And she even worked with our own Rick Bailey, who's the chairman of the board of the Discovery Cube. And Rick is on the call tonight. After working for Hughes and Boeing for 34 years, she joined the U.S. Air Force as director of Launch Enterprise in Los Angeles. She's currently running the graduate program in systems engineering at Loyola Marymount University. Please welcome from North Carolina, Claire Leone. Claire, it's over to you.
It always takes a couple seconds to get set up. Thank you, Jay. I'm actually in South Carolina, so it is 10:07 South Carolina time. So anyway, that was Jay's reference to welcome from North Carolina. It's really South Carolina. But it's great to join you all and to share the research that I did as part of my PhD program. So I'll tell you a little bit about myself. First, I have to get the controls to work. So this is what I'm going to cover. I'll tell you a little bit about my background, the problem statement of the Leaky pipeline of not just having it be hard to attract women to STEM, but then the number of people that leave, my research, and then trying to figure out practical applications to the research as well. So this is the graphic view that Jay described. I hired into Hughes in 1979, and really, I think extremely naive, but really ready to learn and energetic. Made a career of building satellites, retired in 2013. And as Jay said, I went to work for the Air Force as head of what was called the Launch Enterprise. Loyola Marymount asked me to run the graduate system engineering program, so that is where I am now. So that's kind of the quick snapshot. From a career timeline standpoint, I've kind of kept this graphic up, and I don't intend to tell you every detail of my career, but the decoder ring is that blue, so across the bottom is kind of time, so the different positions, and then I did get married. I do have 3 kids. I have 2 grandchildren. In terms of assignments, I started in propulsion, which I hated, and then I went to test, which I loved, and then went on a foreign assignment. But the blue assignments were where I really felt like I was growing, and then the red assignments were where I felt like I was taking a step back. And when I brief this chart to engineers and people that I might be mentoring, the point is that careers are not linear. You have times when you really feel like you're excelling, times when you feel like you're plateaued, and times when you feel like it's a huge setback. But with tenacity and perseverance, you can kind of have a good career in any case. I do think one of the reasons that I was able to become and retire as a vice president of Boeing was that even when things weren't going so well, I showed up, I had a positive attitude, I worked through issues and earned the trust and support of my management. And, that led to later promotions. And then the other thing was really focusing on the mission and the customer. And so this is a set of pictures of our customers. Sometimes customers become your boss. When I was working one of the Air Force programs, Craig Cooning was not my counterpart, he was my boss's counterpart. Turned out he joined Boeing and became one of the senior vice presidents. So, you never know who you're working with and what positions they might end up in and what impact they might have on you. So, So when I look back over, the progress of women in engineering, it's almost tragically slow. It seemed like in the late 80s, early 90s, it seemed like we were starting to get traction and able to hire more women. But one of the problems we have is that the percentage of female engineers graduating from colleges has peaked at around between 20 and 25%. It depends on the discipline. Is it electrical, mechanical, civil, biotech? It varies a little bit, but whether you're talking the late 90s to early 2000s, or whether you're talking more recent times, we're still in that 20% range, and that's a problem. So the previous chart was from when I was pulling research together for my dissertation. This is a current chart. So what it says is that even as recent as 2017, you're still seeing about 19% women. There's a little bit of good news in that the number of total degrees is going up, but so the number of engineering graduates is going up, but you're still saying, it's still important to realize of the increase, there's still only about 20% of that is women. So we are seeing more graduates in engineering, but that percentage of female engineers is still pretty small. And the problem with that is, and that's who's entering the workforce, and then if people leave the workforce, then the percentage of women in engineering in business is even smaller. And so that's the concern with the leaky pipeline. So there are women who choose to study engineering and then actually never go into the engineering field. And I've seen it even in my time at Loyola Marymount, where, bright young mechanical female engineer, and she's going to healthcare. So she didn't want us to stick with the field of mechanical engineering. And so you'd say, why? We'll talk about some of the possibilities. And then after women start working in engineering companies, there's a pretty good attrition level. And so women aren't necessarily achieving their potential in the field. So this is what my research centered around. And this is, I started at the Claremont Graduate School, the Drucker School of Business in 2000. It took me 10 years to get my PhD, but I did it all while working full time. Drucker is one of the few places, or Claremont's one of the few places where you can study and earn a PhD part-time. So the research approach, this is really very classical research. You start with a literature review, maybe a qualitative survey to start. You develop a set of hypotheses, you develop a model, and then you do a more quantitative survey and analysis, and then possibly come up with a revised model. So this is what I did, and my thesis is a couple hundred pages, so there's lots of gory detail, but this is what the research was about. So I came up with 89 factors that were split between cultural, societal, corporate, and individual factors that affect whether or not somebody is successful in engineering. And I actually studied both men and women and then did a comparison. But the parameters that I was looking for was, you have to figure out how to measure something. So I was measuring job satisfaction, which was self-evaluated, and then salary. And so presumably somebody who was high job satisfaction, high salary, you would view as more successful. What I was looking for was whether these 89 factors contributed. So basically doing regression analysis, did it contribute to this, curve, you could say. And so there's a concept that's called accumulated advantage. It was well studied by Malcolm Gladwell in his book Outliers. It was also studied by Virginia Valian and Why So Slow. But the basic premise is that people who excel have a series of events or a series of factors that accumulate that give them an advantage. So you could imagine somebody from you take Bill Gates, right? So he was in a relatively good neighborhood. He had supportive parents. There was a college nearby. He was able to get access to computers. So there's a whole bunch of things that helped him along the way. You compare that to somebody who's economically deprived and they have not a series of accumulated advantages, but maybe accumulated disadvantages. So that's sort of how this research was constructed, was those 89 factors could be considered those accumulated advantages. So what matters? And so of those 89 things bucketed into 3 categories, parent influence, teacher influence, building positive, having positive college experiences, those are all things that matter. Individual factors, so I bolded the blue things. So having somebody interested in math, having somebody who likes studying, having a belief that engineering is important, being able to handle stress, these 2 sets of factors really matter when you're talking about, do you achieve a good level of success from happiness, and I use salary because that's a little bit easier to measure than other less quantitative things. There are within the corporate environment, there are things that make people want to stay longer. So a supportive work environment, developmental opportunities, and then lack of the negative factors of things like confrontation or abuse. You want to not have those kinds of things. So those are the organizational factors. So it didn't matter. What did not, and when I say didn't matter, it did not show a correlation. Family background, whether it was a rich family, poor family, did not matter. So family income, whether somebody went to private school, public school, co-ed, single, none of that correlated. Whether a company was flat or hierarchical, or whether they had mentoring or didn't, that did not show correlation. And then at an individual level, sports participation, music, I would have thought it would correlate, but it doesn't. And exposure to engineering in high school, GPA didn't correlate, and then propensity to take risks. These were self-evaluated, so research in itself is sometimes imperfect, but again, this is where I did not show correlation. And so then you say, okay, what's next? What we want to do is figure out how to change the perception of engineering. So when you hear, and particularly when I was growing up, when you heard the term engineer, what did you think of? And it was sort of the male-dominated, pocket protectors, nerds, boring, intimidating, lacking social skills, not necessarily treating people well. So this is, again, to this day, many people think this is who engineers are. So the question is, how do we change that perception? And so some ideas are through like a media campaign, showing women making a difference in engineering. I do think there's some really good commercials out there from both Boeing and General Motors of, making a difference in the world through engineering. I think those two, I'm impressed with them, so I think they're impactful. But also showing the spectrum of career opportunities in engineering. And then movies and TV shows where you see women being successful in engineering, I think that's important as well. At the university and company level, outreach to elementary school, middle school, high school. So I do think this is one area where, Discovery can help impact is, again, having tours from, again, elementary, middle, high school, and then showing the possibilities of careers or just interesting science facts or science elements that spark an interest. Because I think what we're really trying to do is spark that interest. And then companies also outreaching to universities. So those, I think, can help change that perception. Some of the women that I worked with ended up studying engineering because they went to a campus event where that was sponsored, where they had engineers come in from local industry, and then they got to understand what engineers do, and some then chose to go train. I know one woman who was a nurse, but she decided that wasn't the perfect career for her, so she went to one of these career days and ended up getting her engineering degree, and then ended up at Hughes, and long term she ended up becoming a program manager and retiring at a senior level, so that was nice. At a corporate level, and this is where I don't really think that Discovery can help much, but within companies, I do think there are times when women find that they feel that the organization's not supportive, or they'll have a boss that, you see this picture here with a guy, talking down to somebody, or to a woman. Sometimes the work environment can be undermining, or oftentimes women engineers are known as being very productive and good at what they do. So then the bosses pile on more work, and possibly not without like a promotion or compensation, and that gets frustrating. And women do have multiple roles. Many times they are, working in a, high-powered job and trying to take care of kids at home, and that multi-role can drive them away. So, the work environment can drive women out of STEM. So why women leave engineering? About half said because it was the working conditions, it was the climate, their boss, the culture. Some said it was to spend more time with family, and some said it was lack of advancement and low salary. However, the kicker is that 2/3 of the women who left were known to actually go back into the work environment, but not necessarily in engineering, and become, management or executives in other companies, non-engineering, at relatively high pay levels. So this says they didn't leave because they didn't want to work hard. They left because the climate wasn't what they wanted it to be. This is not universal. I think you could take any of the big companies and you would have pockets where some departments and some bosses were excellent and had a very good culture, and you could have other departments where it was a relatively hostile or oppressive environment. So again, you track attrition and who's staying and who's going, and obviously companies don't like to lose people, so they try to train and coach managers and not have the negative work environments, but they do happen. So how do you improve the workplace climate? By creating development opportunities. This is training managers, training employees how to step up and push back and state what they need. But part of it's also then having a strong organizational culture. So supervisors need to be trained and mentor. If there is bad, uncivil behavior, it needs to be rooted out and transitioned into a culture of respect. And then companies that offer work-life initiatives and support a family culture, that can help too. I think this whole current environment with COVID and whatnot, we may find that companies are more receptive to some of these work-life initiatives. Being at home part of the time may become an okay thing, because right now we've kind of set a whole new level there. And then at an individual level, what does it take to be successful in engineering? a lot of it starts with self-confidence, the ability to get stuff done, give an assignment, figure out how to work through it. If you don't know how to do it, go ask. Drive, perseverance. I do think women in engineering, because they're a minority and whatnot, you have to have a thick skin and not let some snide remark bother you. So that's a hard skill to develop, but I do think that's important. Obviously, a love of science and technology, and that's who I think you're trying to attract to the Discovery Science Center. And then ability to work with other engineers and people in general. So those are things that, again, showed in the research and compare with my personal opinion. I do think we have almost an unprecedented number of visible women leaders. Some of these women have now retired, but they made it to very senior positions in very large organizations. And so having women like these women as role models is really important, and I think they are paving the way. So that's good news. But there's other good news in that there's the next generation as well. So again, part of my research and then giving some other talks, I was coming across some young women entrepreneurs that started their own companies. And so as you see young women starting and being successful, and then they become role models. So to some level, these might be the kind of women that you want to attract to help at the Discovery Cube and setting up exhibits and inspiring others. I put this talk together several years ago, but I've looked up all of these young women, and they're all still in business and they're still doing well. So I think that's inspiring too. And then I'm a big fan of Sheryl Sandberg and her approach. She has started this organization, Lean In. She has a book that's called Lean In. But her push is that women need to be as ambitious as men and take a seat at the table. Her concern is that sometimes women will start their career and then pull back, right? And so, I might have a child, so I might not want to step up and take on a big assignment. And so women's behavior can be self-limiting before their careers even getting started. And so she's out there very vocally trying to get women to take on bigger roles, to not act passively, to not sit in the back of the room, but to be present, accounted for, and to really push. And so her message is, to grow the number of women in the workforce, we need, everybody working together, sticking together, and then it makes it more fun. And from an individual standpoint, it's sort of like this concept of accumulated advantage that women might be taking themselves out of the workforce kind of one small step at a time, as opposed to trying to stay in the workforce through lots of small decisions, and then making themselves more recognized and more seen as a key person inside a company. So I do think there can be a call to action. And so from a media standpoint of looking for opportunities to include and highlight women. So, the movie Gravity is a great example, or NCIS, I love Abby in that show, but showing that it's cool to be smart. So, that's good. And we want to continue that. And then companies, are companies doing everything they can? Are they proud of their culture? Can they do more? And are they consciously checking the health of the culture and making adjustments? And then women, again, from the individual standpoint, women stepping up. So anyway, that's a pretty high-speed pass. I think I met my 20 minutes, and so I'm completely open for questions.
And thank you so much, Dr. Leon. That was incredible and very inspiring. I know we have some very good questions. And so, thank you again for all of your participation. I think Janet will mention it, but I would be remiss if I didn't also say we encourage everyone also to consider watching Dream Big, a film about women in STEM. And so, way to go to the McGilverys too, who are very thoughtfully supporting this in many ways in addition to that. So a couple of questions to start with that were provided to us before the presentation. And I think you hit on some of these, but as we're thinking about our young women in school right now, What can Discovery Cube do to help guide grade school kids to get interested in STEM? Should we do something different for girls?
Well, for different for girls, I think I would say role models. And so if you have exhibits that highlight the women astronauts, for example, I just wrapped up a leadership class at Loyola Marymount, and everybody had to pick a leader, and two different women in the class happened to pick women astronauts. And it was clear that they found these women to be totally inspiring, and then makes me want to go read about them as well. So I do think exhibits and activities that show women trailblazing, and that this is just part, women are already there and they can do it too, is important. The other thing that I think is important, and this is not male-female, but getting teachers inspired and getting parents inspired, because I think a lot of kids follow what their parents' interests are. So whether it's fishing or hunting or gazing at stars or following rocket launches, if the parents are excited, they often get the kids excited. So I would think about kind of as a matched set, parents, teachers, and kids. And one of my fears with teachers is a lot of them are afraid of math. And so how do you take the fear factor out of math so that they encourage students to study math? That was probably the biggest thing that my own dad, who was an engineer, kept saying when I was in middle school, high school, early college, was keep up your math and science, because with that, you can do anything.
Great. And I think that kind of dovetails nicely into another question, which is the advice you give to parents to encourage their daughters in science and math. What age do you think that should begin?
Okay, so I have a granddaughter she just turned 4, and I spend a fair amount of time, even at her age, doing, I don't know what I'd call mathy kinds of things, whether it's puzzles or the game of concentration or numbers, so I know I'm there now with my granddaughter trying to encourage already. So I don't think you can start too early, and doing just simple things that teach logic skills and math skills, and really simple, but the key is to make it fun and that there's a point to it, right? That if you do this and this, then you can launch a rocket, right? And so doing silly things like balloon games or water balloons, whatever, a lot of it can be fun too.
I love that. And it builds that confidence that you're talking about over time. So you keep, reaching for the stars more and more. Do you think that girls are treated differently when it comes to STEM in school?
So
Even
I think
the earliest ages.
I hope that's changing. There's a lot of societal factors that were there, I think, when I was growing up, and I think they're still there, from Barbie dolls to I don't know what, but certainly we have a culture that encourages boys to do rough and tumble and blow stuff up, and you encourage girls to play with dolls and be kind and nurturing, right? So at a very young age, I think we have some cultural things going on. So I think you can counter that with just the play, games, have fun, teach logic and all that. By the time you get to high school, then the question is, do you have physics teachers that are encouraging boys and discouraging girls? And that's going to be it depends. And so this is where parents can help, is understanding who's teaching their kids and are the kids in the right class, right? And so I do mentor some, high school, early college, early career young women, and some have said, even as recent as, graduating from high school 5 years ago, you'll have a physics teacher who kind of puts one person down and elevates another. And so you can counter that with good home support, and trying to figure out how to let it roll off your back. I think that's harder to do as a high school student, but but it's just through encouragement and awareness and saying what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. Over time, I'm hoping that goes away completely. And I certainly, I said I've known of a couple of instances that are, my youngest is 24, and so it's like one of her peers. And I've known of other physics teachers who have said, really been encouraging too. So it is not universal. And so you really have to monitor who's teaching your kids and see if you have somebody who's negative, at least through home support, kind of discount that negative attitude.
I love that. Sorry, go ahead.
We had a question from Rick Bailey if he wants to join
Yes,
us.
I have those up. Do you want to do it, Jay?
It's up to Rick. Rick, you still there? You're on mute, Rick. Go ahead, Bray.
Okay, well, Rick is the chair of our board, also as a retiree from Boeing, and he said, good to see you and hear you. So I'll share that message for him. Do you see changes in what is inspiring today's young students to pursue science-based activities and eventually careers?
Well, I'm going to give a tribute to SpaceX because I have, so the SpaceX thing's probably a longer story, but I just think that Elon Musk, with his vision of it's on multi fronts, but first with the Falcon and then the Falcon Heavy, and then his ambition to get to Mars, he is inspiring this next generation of what you might want to call space geeks. And so somebody who has that kind of vision is really, I think, very impactful. And so I've been teaching a funny freshman class called Becoming Multiplanetary Species, and it's kind of a takeoff on Elon Musk and Mars. And I can tell you, sometimes trying to teach sciencey stuff to freshmen when it's a mix of like business and entrepreneurs and engineers and film students, kind of like, okay, are we connecting or not? And then I showed this video of the SpaceX Falcon Heavy first launch, and people moved from being slumped back in their seats to being on the edge of their seats. And it was just humorous and refreshing. So I do think, SpaceX with Musk and his vision, it's a big vision, and it's carrying people and it's getting people re-enthused about space. So I think that's very positive. But Discovery Science Center is way beyond, rockets and space. I think that's an element. But biotech and curing cancer and impacting humans is also super important. My older daughter's in biotech and is doing, she's in sales, but her company does cancer research and really fundamentally changing how cancer research is being done, and being much more person-specific, custom cures, and it's really amazing. So even, whether it's biotech or aerospace or climate change, figuring out how to engage, I think is really important.
Thanks, Claire. Sorry, it took me a minute to figure out I was going to be on and get my Zooming in place. I appreciate the answer. It's good to hear. As you can see, an RS-68 over my shoulder right there. To hear space is still in there, and I do think the new space activities has helped that. I was just curious what you were seeing in your, maybe even anecdotally in your system engineering program, about the influence on biotech. My daughter's studying environmental engineering at Cal, and so environment's important to a lot of the younger folks. I just was curious if you were seeing trends. So good update. Thank you.
Okay, so we have a couple more questions, and I know we'll close it up in about 3 minutes, so I'll try to share those. But if there are any questions we didn't get to, we will make sure that we connect with our friend Dr. Leon and get those answers to everyone. So Barbara Mason, also from Boeing, asked the question, we seem to have many female engineering interns every summer, and they seem very engaged. Wonder why they do not continue the path in college.
So you're saying that they actually leave the field and don't finish their degree?
Yes, it looks like that is what she's referring to. It seems like they go in, but they don't stay pursuing engineering all the way to the final part.
Right. So that's the leaky pipeline, and that's one of the things that we really need to figure out how to fix, because it's, they're so close yet so far. Internships are a double-edged sword. You will find some students have internships and have a phenomenal experience and stay for life, and some get stuck in something that's really boring, or they have a bad boss, or it just didn't click. Sometimes it's really hard to get really good internship assignments because it takes a lot of effort. And so, it's a dilemma, I think, because companies will hire hundreds of interns, thinking it's the right thing to do. You're giving them money and a job, and they should be grateful for that. But they also want to learn something and do something interesting. And sometimes they get sidelined. So some could get scared away by a boring internship assignment and again, not feel that cultural fit. One of the really good Boeing engineers who is still there, she ended up getting a full ride for chemical engineering. And so her first summer of college, she went and worked in a refinery and hated it. And so the good thing about her full ride for a 4-year degree is it didn't matter if she stayed in chemical engineering or not. So she switched to aerospace and she loves it. So again, somebody might try an internship and it just isn't a good fit. And so, but I think the bosses, organizations, have to be very careful to say, is this a good, doesn't have to be a hugely meaty assignment. It's got to be interesting and people have to feel like it was useful. If people feel like they just did nothing over a summer, then they could say, that's not the career for me.
Okay, so I'm going to go with, we have time maybe just to hit these 2 questions. I'm going to make them into one question if that's possible. So kind of switching gears from internships to more about mentoring. How have mentoring programs changed over the years? Are women becoming more supportive of women in the workplace? And I think kind of part B, what can the workplace do to help support the advancement of women? And I'll add the advancement of each other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so mentoring's tricky. Mentoring is, you kind of have to have a relationship. And so what companies can do broadly is just encourage mentoring. And then again, it's got to get down to the supervisor employee level, and then the supervisor caring enough to go find a mentor or get the person to find a mentor, and then just encouraging the time and allowing space for that. In terms of women supporting each other, it's a little tricky. I don't think I was a great mentor for my first 10 or 15 years because I was still learning myself, and I don't think I thought I had anything to offer. And then when I became a program management level, then it was like a light goes off and it's like, oh, well, I can help this person, I can help that person. And then by the time I became a vice president, you have very little extra bandwidth. So what I would do is I would have what's called mentoring groups. I would get groups of people together, and then like once a month, and we would go through a book or do this or that. So there are strategies, but it's a cultural thing. The company has to want and encourage it.
Great. Thank you so much. That's very interesting and helpful. And we have really enjoyed your presentation and all of the wonderful questions you've answered. So just a big thank you from our team. I now have the wonderful honor of introducing our very own Janet Ray, and really matriarch of the Cube and our Innovators Chair. Janet.
Well, thank you, Bree, and thank you, all of you, for joining us this evening. It's a hard act to follow. Claire, you have really brought to life the importance of the family feel, being a family, mentoring your children, and we mentoring the children of the Cube. So I'm really thrilled to have you here for our second Cube talk. I truly appreciate it. Okay, Dylan Watkins is going to be our next speaker on September 8th. And he is the CEO of Reality Smash, and he'll be presenting the power of social connection in virtual reality. As we develop better technologies for virtual reality experience, the social connections between humans are going to expand and grow. Virtual reality has a much greater potential of any other social platforms for people to experience emotional extremes. Dylan will explore the social issues that virtual reality will face in the future and how building safer online virtual communities will make virtual reality a tool for enhancing the human experience. Then we have in October, Dr. Ian Fente, Dr. Fente from NASA, and on November 10th is Dr. Amy Zimmer-Faust from this Southern California Coastal Water Research Project. And then finally, Dr. Dan Cooper on December 8th. I thought that that the presentation that Claire Leon did tonight was exceptional, and I was very moved by it. And I just want to thank everybody for attending, and hope to see you next month. So thank you and good night.